Hello, my name is Hassan Sorrells, and this is the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast shorts. There's no co-host on these shorts episodes. These are now around 2 to 4 minute, sometimes as long as 6 to 10 minute observations, ideas, thoughts, or rants about the literature, philosophy, psychology, and even the theology of leadership. Because listening to me talk about leadership for now around 2 to 4 minutes is still better than reading and trying to understand yet another business book. Even that business book your coworker won't stop raving about because it quote-unquote changed their life, but you can't see any difference in their leadership behavior. So how good could that author be? Much of what we modern people think of as Christmas, the music, the movies, the nostalgia, the explosion of gifts under the tree, the travel, even the tree itself, are the results of corporate marketers' successful efforts over the course of the last 90 years to make the season about something other than the birth of Christ. Charles Dickens took the first crack at breaking the foundation of a biblically based focus on Christmas with his book, A Christmas Carol. Published in 1843 and authored by a creative who was searching for a way to position and critique the excesses wrought by industrialization in England, the book was an enormous success. It was the first real shot fired at the foundations of Christmas, a celebration somewhat less extravagant than most moderns would believe throughout Western history, in the war waged by Enlightenment thinkers who believed you could have a culture unmoored from the church. But what they didn't realize was that when you unmoor the church, the state inevitably rushes in to fill the vacuum left behind, and the traditions that maintain the society and culture become harder and harder to justify. And then the industrialists, the corporatists, the entertainers, the hucksters, and the marketers come along like a plague of locusts and consume much of what remains of the foundations of the culture, ultimately hollowing out what few traditions manage to hang on. Thus we come, 182 years after Dickens, to the point where we need a new vision of Christmas, but one that merges the best parts of the Dickensian vision, redemption, renewal, and forgiveness, with the best parts of the biblical vision, redemption, renewal, and forgiveness. Leaders lead. They lead on traditions, they lead in their families, they lead in their communities, and they even lead in the good times. And well, that's it for me. Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast today. And now that you've made it this far, you should subscribe to the audio version of this show on all the major podcast players, including Apple iTunes, Spotify, YouTube Music, and everywhere else where podcasts are available. There's also a video version of our podcast on our YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to the video version of this podcast on the Leadership Toolbox channel on YouTube. Just search for Leadership Toolbox and hit the subscribe button there on YouTube. And while you're doing that, leave a 5-star review if you like what we're doing here on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Just go below the player and hit 5 stars. We need those reviews to grow, and it's the easiest way to help grow this show. And tell all your friends, of course, in leadership. By the way, if you don't like what we're doing here, well, you can always listen to another leadership show. There are several other good ones out there. At least that's what I've heard. All right. Well, that's it for me.